My name is Rebecca Hart. I've never been the one who mattered. You learn that early in a house full of noise. Growing up without my mother, I guess I was always a reminder of something missing. My father, he used to love me. At least I think he did. Before everything changed. Before Lillian stepped into our lives like a shadow that couldn't be outrun. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was enough to make my father disappear. He was gone long before his body did. Lillian wasn't cruel at first. No, she just knew how to make you feel small, like you were always in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she did it so effortlessly. She made it clear, without saying it out loud, that I was nothing more than an accessory to the family. Just a quiet thing in the background, meant to clean, to serve, to stay out of sight. And then there were Olivia and Daniel. I don't think they ever meant to be cruel. They were just products of Lillian's world, and I was the one who didn't fit. The one who didn't belong. Every family dinner was the same. I'd cook, serve, and sit in silence, pretending I couldn't hear them laugh, pretending the emptiness didn't crush me. My father? He'd sit at the head of the table, pretending like nothing was wrong. I'd look at him, wishing he would see me, wishing he would fight for me. But he didn't. I was invisible to him. I learned to silence the pain, to swallow my words and my dreams, letting the quiet suffocate me. I'd pretend to be content in the background, pretending I was okay with the life they gave me. But I wasn't. I was dying a little every day, piece by piece, like sand slipping through the cracks of a broken hourglass. I kept waiting. Waiting for someone to notice me. Waiting for my father to look up from his endless work and see his daughter. But he never did. Not until it was too late. Dinner was always the hardest part of the day. I knew what to expect: the clinking of silverware, the smell of food I'd spent hours preparing, the fake smiles they wore like masks. Olivia would roll her eyes if the wine glasses weren't set perfectly, and Daniel would make some joke about me being the family servant. And the worst part? My father would laugh along, as if this was all just normal, as if I was nothing, more than a fixture in the room. Lillian? She was the queen, the one who dictated everything. She never had to raise her voice, but there was always a coldness in her eyes. A power that made me feel like I was the one who didn't belong. She'd say things like, "Rebecca, could you at least try to be useful?" Or, "Don't forget to bring dessert before the wine maid." It never occurred to her that I was family, too. I was just something to be ordered around, something to be dismissed when they were done with me. And I played along. For years, I played the role of the silent servant. I'd smile when they asked for something, keep my head down when they mocked me, and pretend the loneliness didn't hurt. I'd smile at Olivia, who always had the best clothes, the newest car. I'd smile at Daniel, who was always the center of attention. And my father, once my protector, was a ghost who never noticed how much I faded into the background. But inside, I was screaming. Every time they laughed at me, every time they made me feel like I was invisible, it tore at me. They didn't see it, though. They didn't see the way my heart ached when they pretended. I wasn't even there. And my father? He was too lost in his new life with Lillian to see the daughter he had left behind. The daughter who was nothing more than a shadow in his eyes. I didn't want to be their background noise anymore. I didn't want to be invisible. But I didn't know how to escape. Not yet. It happened slowly. At first, my father seemed tired, but it wasn't anything we couldn't ignore. We always had a reason to push it aside. Work was stressful. His meetings had been long. He just needed some rest. Lillian told him to take it easy, but I saw the way she looked at him, like he was just another thing to manage, another thing that needed fixing. She never cared about him the way a wife should. She cared about what he could give her. But then, one day, it was different. My father collapsed at the breakfast table. I wasn't prepared for that. You never think the world will stop turning until it does. He was always so strong, so in control. I had never seen him vulnerable. And yet, here he was, struggling to breathe, helpless. Lillian's panic was real, but it was short-lived. She had no patience for anything that might disrupt her life. She screamed at me to call for help, but her voice was sharp, like she was angry at the situation, angry at him for making her lose control. It was always like that with her. Only her needs mattered, and now her perfect life was crumbling. She wouldn't let it show, but I could see it in her eyes. The fear wasn't for my father. It was for herself. I was the one who stayed by my father's side that night, as the doctors worked to stabilize him. I wasn't sure if he even recognized me. His gaze was distant, clouded, as if I was a stranger. Lillian spent more time on the phone, organizing her next dinner party, making sure her social calendar stayed intact. Olivia and Daniel? They acted like it was just another inconvenience, another thing to work around. I felt my heart sink as I realized something. My father was slipping away from me, and the family that was supposed to be mine was already looking past him, looking past me. I had become a ghost in their eyes long before he had. But this time, it wasn't about being invisible. It was about being alone. It was the night before the will reading. My father was still in the hospital, but no one had the decency to stay with him. Lillian was busy picking out her outfit for some charity event. Olivia was texting her friends, and Daniel was on his way out to meet up with some girl I'd never met. Dinner, as usual, was my responsibility. The same routine every time. I'd set the table, cook the food, and serve it all like a well-oiled machine, pretending I was okay with it. They never asked how my day was. They never cared. I remember standing in the kitchen, stirring the soup, trying not to let the hurt take over. It was quiet, but I could feel the tension in the air. I had learned to tune out their laughter, their voices, but it was different tonight. There was a weight to it, an anticipation that I couldn't shake. Maybe it was because I knew something was coming, something that would change everything. I had no idea what it was, but I could feel it creeping in, waiting to break me open. When the table was set, I called them all to dinner. Olivia strutted in first, already looking like she had everything under control. Her new dress was the color of arrogance, and her laugh echoed through the house like a warning bell. She eyed me and smirked. "Don't forget the wine glasses, maid," she said, her words sharp and cold. I could feel her gaze on me, as if she expected me to crack, to shrink. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I just kept my head down and finished what I had to do. When Lillian walked in, her eyes flicked over to me, but there was nothing but disdain in that look. "If you want to eat, serve first," she said, her voice like a whip cracking. The others laughed, and my stomach twisted. I stood there numb. My father wasn't at the table, and I realized just how empty it all was. These people, these strangers, who wore the mask of family, would never see me as anything more than the help, and I was done. I didn't say anything. I just walked away. The doorbell rang, sharp and unexpected, cutting through the tension like a knife. The sound sliced through the heavy, suffocating air of the room, pulling my focus away from the dark pit in my stomach. I wasn't sure what I expected, but it certainly wasn't the man who walked in next. He was tall, sharply dressed, and his presence felt out of place in this house, like he belonged somewhere else, in a world far beyond the walls of this family's cold, sterile mansion. His shoes clicked sharply on the polished floor as he stepped into the room. The moment he appeared, Olivia, Daniel, and Lillian paused, their conversations halting like a record scratching. "Ms. Rebecca Hart?" he asked, his voice calm, yet unyielding. The room fell silent. I looked at him, trying to understand why he had come. My father wasn't home. He was in the hospital, lying there, helpless. He had no strength to deal with anything anymore. But this man was standing there, holding something I couldn't yet see in his hands. I nodded slowly, though I felt a wave of unease wash over me. The lawyer didn't waste time. He pulled out a large sealed envelope, the kind you see in movies, when things are about to change forever. I knew what it was before he even opened it. This wasn't a random visit. This was something important, something real. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to speak. As per Mr. Jonathan Hart's final will, he started, his voice measured, deliberate. He let the words hang in the air, to be read in the presence of all heirs. I glanced at my family. Lillian's eyes flicked between me and the lawyer, her mouth slightly open in surprise, as though she didn't know whether to be angry or scared. Olivia's face froze, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wineglass. Daniel didn't hide his irritation, his eyes narrowing as he stood up, the air thick with his challenge. The lawyer continued, but his words barely reached me. They were drowned out by the beating of my heart, by the sudden, dizzying realization that my life was about to shift in ways I couldn't yet fully grasp. The lawyer read aloud, and as the words hit me, I felt my entire world tilt. All property, financial assets, and the family estate shall go solely to my biological daughter, Rebecca Hart. No other individual shall retain ownership or rights to reside on my property after my passing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lillian's mouth dropped open. Olivia gasped audibly. Daniel, enraged, shot up from his chair. He opened his mouth, but the lawyer silenced him with a single look. "This is final," the lawyer said, his voice unwavering. "Effective immediately." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I wanted to laugh or scream. For years I had been the servant, the shadow in the corner, the invisible girl. And now, the house was mine. I didn't have to ask for anything anymore. I didn't have to beg. I had everything, and they had nothing. I wish I could say I felt a rush of victory, but that wasn't it. It wasn't triumph or power that filled me. It was disbelief. The lawyer's words kept echoing in my mind, but my body couldn't catch up. Everything I had lived through, everything I had endured. Was this the payoff? Was this the moment that made it all worthwhile? Or was it just another cruel twist in a life full of them? I looked at my father's empty chair at the head of the table. It was still warm. He should have been there, proud of me, but instead he was a sick man, lying somewhere far away, detached from the family he had built and broken in equal measure. And then there was Lillian. She was shaking. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that she had lost control. For the first time, I saw a crack in her cold, perfect exterior. She wasn't just angry. She was scared. Scared of losing the life she had worked so hard to craft, the life that was built on the back of my silence. Olivia's face was flushed with disbelief. She sputtered a few words, but nothing made sense. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Like the world she had spent years enjoying was suddenly slipping away, like she wasn't the center of attention anymore. Daniel didn't even try to hide his outrage. He slammed his hand against the table, his chair scraping loudly as he stood. "This is ridiculous!" he shouted. "You can't be serious. He can't leave everything to her. She's nothing." His words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. No, I wasn't the nothing he thought I was. I had been nothing to them for so long, but that had changed. The lawyer stepped in, calm and firm. "This will is final," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "There is no room for discussion. Ms. Hart is now the rightful heir." I could feel their eyes on me. Lillian's gaze was cold, calculating. Olivia's face had turned from anger to desperation. Daniel looked like he wanted to break something. They had never seen me as more than a servant, a background figure. But now, I was the one who held all the cards. And the best part? I didn't have to say a word. The silence that filled the room spoke louder than anything I could have said. I stood there, my heart pounding, my hands cold but steady. They were all pleading with me in their own ways, but they didn't understand. They never did. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to them. This was about me finally standing up for myself. About me choosing not to be their ghost anymore. It was my turn to be seen, my turn to have a voice, and there was nothing they could do to take it away. The room was still. The air between us thick with tension. A palpable weight that settled in my chest and made it hard to breathe. They didn't move, didn't speak at first. I could feel their eyes on me, trying to read me, trying to figure out how far I would let them go, how much they could push before I would break. Lillian, ever composed, was the first to speak. Her voice, usually so cold and controlled, wavered just slightly. She wasn't as strong as she wanted me to believe. I could see it now. Her perfect facade cracking. "Rebecca, darling," she began, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "You don't have to do this. This house, this life. We can all work it out. You don't need to be so hasty." I met her gaze. For the first time in years, I didn't look away. I held her gaze steady. She wasn't going to pull me back into her web of manipulation. Not this time. "Do you really think I want to keep you all here?" I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be, but firm. "You've made it clear that I'm nothing but a servant to you, Lillian. I've spent my life waiting for someone to treat me like I matter. You never did. None of you did." Olivia's lips trembled as she tried to find her words. "Rebecca, please," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched to sound genuine. "You can't do this. We're family. Don't you remember all the good times we had? We've been through so much together." I almost laughed. The good times? What good times? The years of silence, the years of being treated like I didn't even exist. Those were the good times? "I remember," I said slowly, my eyes hardening. "I remember every time I was treated like the invisible one. Every time I did everything for this family. And you never once acknowledged me. Every time I was told to shut up and do my job, like I didn't have a right to be heard." Daniel didn't even try to hide his frustration. He shot up from the table, his chair scraping across the floor with a loud, ugly sound. "This is bullshit," he spat. "You can't just take everything. This was our home too. We've lived here. You can't just kick us out like we don't matter." I stood tall, my back straight, and locked eyes with him. "You never cared about this house until it was mine. You never cared about me. You've had your life, Daniel. It's my turn now." The anger that had been simmering inside me for so long surged to the surface. But I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The calm, quiet strength in my words was enough to silence them. They were all looking at me now, like they had just realized I wasn't the girl they could walk all over anymore. They were begging, pleading with me, trying to convince me to show mercy. But what mercy had they shown me? What kindness? They'd given me nothing but humiliation. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I've spent my life begging for kindness, and all I got was cruelty. This house is mine now. You're not welcome here anymore. The silence that followed was thick with everything I'd never said, everything I'd held in for so long. They wanted me to feel guilty, to feel sorry for them, but I couldn't. The tables had turned, and for the first time in my life, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The pleading went on for days. They called, they sent texts, they showed up at the door, standing there with their eyes wide, their voices softer, trying to make me feel like I was making a mistake. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. I couldn't even look at them without feeling the weight of all those years. Years of being overlooked, disrespected, dismissed. They didn't just hurt me in small ways. They erased me, made me feel like I didn't even exist, like I was just someone to serve them and stay out of the way. I'd been nothing but a shadow in that house, in their lives. I wasn't going to let them make me feel guilty for taking what was mine. It wasn't about the money or the house or the things they had that I didn't. It was about freedom. It was about finally standing up for myself, finally walking out of the prison I had lived in for so long. They kept saying the same thing. Please, Rebecca, don't do this. We're family. But that was the lie, wasn't it? Family wasn't something you had to beg for. It wasn't something you had to earn by being invisible. Family was supposed to lift you up, not crush you under the weight of their indifference. I thought about my father. His absence in all of this, his absence from my life, had been a wound I'd carried for years. But it wasn't just his fault. Lillian had made sure of that. She had poisoned his love for me, made sure that all I was a problem to be dealt with, a problem to ignore. She didn't want a daughter. She wanted someone who wouldn't question her, someone who wouldn't get in the way. I had finally realized something important. It wasn't my fault. I had spent so many years blaming myself for everything, for not being good enough, for not being noticed. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. My father had failed me, but so had they all. And now I had a chance to take back what was mine. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me every time they called, every time they knocked. But I didn't bend. I didn't cave. I stood tall, even when they tried to break me with their pleas. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. I'm not your servant anymore, I said, looking out the window at the world beyond. I'm not your background noise. This is my life now, and I'm not asking for permission. It was quieter than I had ever known. The house, once filled with tension, once alive with manipulation and power struggles, was now still, empty, silent. It was a strange kind of peace, one that settled over me like a blanket, heavy yet comforting. I walked through the rooms, every step echoing in the hollowed-out space. The grand staircase that I had once avoided, too afraid to climb, now felt like a symbol of something new, something I had earned. This house was mine, but it wasn't just the house. It was everything that came with it: the independence, the dignity, the freedom to be myself. I started making changes right away. The first thing I did was clear out all the things they left behind. Olivia's clothes still hanging in the closet, Daniel's sneakers scattered in the hallway, Lillian's perfume lingering in the air. I didn't want their scent to linger in these rooms, not anymore. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, moved my father's old desk into the study. I didn't need to pretend anymore. I didn't need to hide or shrink into the corners. The house became something more than a place to live. It became a reflection of me, a place where I could finally breathe. I spent hours just walking through the halls, touching the walls, sitting in the spaces where I had always felt so invisible. I let the silence sink into my bones, let it remind me of what I had fought for, what I had won. No more pretending, no more acting like I was less than. And yet, there was a strange sadness that followed me. It was a quiet ache, one I hadn't anticipated. I had spent so many years waiting for my father to come around, waiting for my family to love me the way I had always loved them. But that was never going to happen. They were gone, in every sense of the word. They had never truly been there, for me, and now they never would be. But for the first time, I didn't need them. The peace I felt wasn't about their absence, it was about my presence. It was about knowing that I had finally made a choice for myself. A choice to step into the life I had always deserved, even if it meant stepping away from everything I had known. I was no longer the girl who served dinner, who stayed silent at the table, who quietly picked up the pieces of a broken family. I was the woman who walked away from the hurt. I was the woman who decided that she had nothing to prove. The house was mine. But so was the future. The world felt different now. My every step was filled with something I hadn't known in so long. Purpose. There was a fire in me now, one that burned away the fear, the doubt, the constant need for approval that had shackled me for years. I was no longer the girl they ignored, the daughter who cleaned up their messes. I wasn't the invisible servant that they treated like an afterthought. I was Rebecca Hart, and I had everything. And yet, it wasn't the money, the estate, or the power that gave me this newfound strength. It was the realization that I was finally free from them, free from their cruelty. I stood in front of the mirror one evening, looking at my reflection. The woman staring back at me wasn't the girl who had been silenced for so long. She wasn't the girl who had learned to disappear. She was a woman who had fought for herself, who had taken everything that was rightfully hers and refused to apologize for it. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone anymore. The apologies, the explanations, those were for people who still sought approval. And I had long stopped needing theirs. The days of hiding in the shadows, shrinking to fit into a mold that didn't suit me, were over. It was strange, but liberating. For so long I had believed that their rejection of me was my fault. I believed that I wasn't worthy of love, of respect, of a place at the table. But in that stillness, in the peace of the house that was now truly mine, I realized something. It had never been about me. It had always been about them, about their own insecurities, their own failures to see me. And now I was standing on my own 2 feet, strong, resilient, empowered. There were no more family dinners to sit through in silence, no more pretending to be the background noise. I wasn't just living in a house anymore. I was living in the life I had built for myself, one brick at a time, one decision at a time. The world outside still moved and changed, but I was no longer a passive observer. I was part of it now. They had thought I was weak, that I wouldn't survive without them, but they were wrong. I didn't need their approval to exist. I didn't need their love to be whole. I was finally free, and for the first time in my life, I knew that I was enough.